Hi, so my name is Susanna, and I'm making this video to talk about something very, very, very odd. I'm reading from something I wrote to make it as comprehensive as possible, and I'm going to refer to what I'm talking about as the Kingdom of Stuffed Animals, as that's the name of the website I found that was the genesis for the ensuing experience. If you do a search for it online, you can see that it has certain optics, that it doesn't necessarily look like something that anyone would be inclined to look further into. I was trying to simply and clearly state what was going on, but without context and evidence, I haven't been able to make much progress with it. So why didn't I communicate about it more effectively? I felt like I was stuck in a loop of sorts, and that's what this video is about. I have a sense of a lack of free will, or a very deep learned helplessness. And the kingdom of stuffed animals makes me very anxious, so when it's time to talk about it in a way that other people will hear, something kicks in to give me a sense of aversion to explaining it. And other people seem innately averse to hearing about it as well. I don't know if there are certain innate parameters here, but it certainly feels extremely difficult to talk about it. I think that deep down I do want to address it, and I do want it to be known in spite of the frightening implications of it, and that talking about it openly is an important part of the trajectory of the whole thing. Okay, so let me begin. In late August of 2012, in a year that could have been the apocalypse but wasn't, I found a website called the Kingdom of Stuffed Animals. It was at the URL tksa.jp. The site isn't live anymore, but you can see parts of it on the Wayback Archive. And my Tumblr blog basically documents the whole thing, but I'll get to that later. So there were actually two parts of the site that were connected. One had these really, really, really long lists of words, and another had pictures of cats with cryptic, scary captions and so-called jokes, referencing surveillance in a future world, and a king, who on the website was named as Kunihiro Yamada, and a queen, for which it said file does not exist. This may all be clearer on the Wayback Archive. But the really important part of the site was the words. There were a seemingly infinite amount of these lists, with many words, certainly millions, constantly regenerating, that I would come to look at for a very long time. I was seemingly entranced by it. But when I first started looking at them in 2012, they looked like word salad to me too. Although nobody has really seen all of it, it's often dismissed as the Bader-Meinhof phenomenon at best, and ideas of reference or aberrant salience types of ideas which are connected to mental illness at worst. I understand that this is because it lacks the better empirical explanation that I have to provide in order for this current stage of ignorance about it to end. And I can provide it, and I will. So back when I first started to read it, after initially thinking nothing of it, I began to notice something inexplicable that was seemingly impossible. I found words that referenced things I read, things I wrote, things I saw, things I dreamt of, things I thought about, things I remembered, the names of people I knew. Just all of these specific, very specific words about what one might call my consciousness, or a code representing my consciousness. Not all of the words, but many of them. And of course I was extremely confused. How would these words be showing up on a website? How would anyone have access to the very contents of my brain? And I was basically in shock. And I started to freak out in some very strange ways. I started to act out in public. Because I noticed that whenever I would make noise, well, let me first say this. If I would go out, let's say go to the deli and ask for a cup of coffee, I would get my cup of coffee and I would go, and that would be it. But if I would be out there yelling or singing or doing and saying things in public that were strange, it was like I was invisible. I want to point out now that if you go to my website about this, which I'm working on, thekingdomofstuffedanimals.com, you will see a music video with the same situation. A girl screaming in public with lots of papers in her bedroom, and nobody hears her, and then everybody disappears. The song is called Warning by Incubus. The lyrics are very prescient too. But it's not like I saw the video and decided to assign it to my experience. It's just a really apt portrayal of all of this. The lesson I take from it is that I need to stop screaming, as I kind of am online as well as in real life, and just start explaining. So that's what I'm trying to do. So let's go back to the words. You may ask yourself whether I talk to anyone in my life, friends, family, to get their feedback. And the answer is largely no, and when I did, I usually had this same loop feeling about talking about it weekly, almost not even totally conscious of it. I only ever convinced anyone when I printed things out and compiled them in an irrefutably clear way. I only did this very rarely, but when I did, that was when I made progress. Something very weird was and is going on with my consciousness and that of others, something that can't be entirely organic. Rather than gathering up as much evidence as possible and making it perfectly clear and showing it to the people around me, which led to the outcome I wanted, I wrote on my blog for 5 years. I often was confused about whether anyone was reading it, which of course they weren't. I was deeply, deeply confused. I knew what was happening in terms of the website and my consciousness, and reading the words constantly confirmed it, But outside of this basic reality, I had no idea why or how it was occurring. I still don't. I don't know how I'm not more scared, and I don't know why I feel this aversion to proving it. But I know that ultimately I can. I plan to write books about this experience, and the first one is going to be called To Be a Bat. A phenomenologist named Thomas Nagel posited that one can never know what it's like for a bat or other animal to be that animal. There is a unique subjective quality to every experience. The irony, of course, is that my experience is based on an objective phenomenon, and I am not, as it were, a bat. The fascinating thing about my blog is that at first glance, the phenomenon seems very word salad-y still. You have to go deeper, and you can. If you don't, you will see lists, many lists, where I annotated the connections I saw, and if you don't look at a good number of them, you might get the sense that I was cherry-picking words out and drawing connections where there were none. This is, again, the optics. A good place to start is with the names, as those are uncontestable. And I will tell you that a careful examination of the blog will actually illustrate the point that I'm making about the website and my consciousness. Extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence, and it is there in spite of its limitations. People just need to observe it. Not to mention that the whole premise only gets weirder from there. Because not only could I make those connections at the time, I can still find connections to the present moment when I look at them now. So if I'm in the position to explain the blog now, not only can I expand on the work I was doing in this weird kind of trance, not even realizing that no one was reading it and there was so much more I could be doing, but I can continually analyze them no matter when I look at them. And so can you. At many points on the blog, I just posted screenshots with no annotations, and the ones with annotations also have plenty of words that are not related to me. My hypothesis is that not only can I find words pertaining to myself on there at any time at all, but that all of the words apply to people who will eventually read them. I'm not a quantum physicist, but there seems to be something that upends our ideas of space and time going on. I don't know that everybody who reads it will have the same experience I did, but I think many will. You may be wondering how to check for yourself, and that's what I'm going to direct you to. I made a website at thekingdomofstuffedanimals.com where all you have to do is look at a measly 3 of the lists. I posted them without explanation because I want to see if my hypothesis is correct. If the phenomenon replicates with others, well, some very interesting times may be coming. What does all of this mean? How is all of it possible? Falsifications abound. People will say things like it's akin to reading a horoscope or getting a tarot reading and attributing it to your own experience, that I'm flagrantly schizophrenic, that since a priori there's no way that this makes sense, it must be false. But if enough people read it and realize that we're all, actually, the kingdom of stuffed animals, then maybe some real progress can be made on a foundational level. If you want to check out the janky blog, it's at susannao.tumblr.com. Remember that I was in a weird state of mind and it needs to be considered in its totality as well as re-explained. The best way to read the blog is to make a Tumblr account and view it in a web browser, not the app. Clicking on the archive on the top bar, not the Wayback Archive, which is also linked on there, will take you to the data part of the blog. The screenshots posted throughout the years are what I was reading. Again, I often annotated them, but not very well. It can all be revisited since the data is up there. I guess this next question is what this all means for the world and what we can do with it. That's where I need you. Thanks for listening, and remember what Shakespeare said. There's more in heaven and earth, Horatio, than is dreamt of in your philosophy.